Okay. So just to repeat, we will have class today, and then next class hopefully we will have on Friday. But uske baad, the 3 days I cannot. So anyway, 2nd is 2nd October, and Tuesday and Wednesday is festival time. So Ashtami and Navami. तो उस दिन नहीं होगा. फ्राइडे मैं कोशिश करती हूँ, नहीं तो मंडे से तो वी विल हैव रेगुलर क्लासेस प्लस वी विल हैव सैटरडे क्लासेस for at least 3 to 4 Saturdays. If required, we'll have more. But हम ट्रैक पे आ जाएंगे. अभी हम उसके पहले से तो ट्रैक पे चल ही रहे हैं. So it's not like there's not much delay. So there's no worry regarding that. All right. In the meanwhile, this week I'll try and evaluate your answer scripts. So hopefully we'll be able to do that. Okay, so let's get started. What we will do today is now work on explicitly the expectations models. ठीक है, तो अभी तो हमने बेसिकली थोड़ा थोड़ा बिल्डअप किया है उसके लिए. अभी we will work, like we will look at them in detail directly and look at how different kinds of expectations throw out different kinds of policy conclusions, right? So what we are left with in macro only is these expectations जो हम आज कर लेंगे. Rational का I'll give you a brief, and then the way we will do rational expectations is incorporate the model along with that. ठीक है, तो हम अलग से एक्सपेक्टेशंस मॉडल नहीं करेंगे. हम जो हमारा ISLM PC मॉडल है ना, जो ASAD मॉडल है बेसिकली, उसमें ही हम incorporate कर लेंगे rational expectations and we'll see how the results differ. And then we have new classicals, which are basically these rational expectation guys, and the new Keynesians, which are the most sensible guys, right? So for new Keynesians, we'll need another class, or baki do classes में. So another 3 classes will be done, right? So that's the plan. Let's start with the theory of expectations. 1 second. Okay. So what we will do is called the theory of expectations, or rather the theories of expectations. Alright, अभी तक हमने बात की थी कि कैसे जो पाई ET था, है ना, पाई ET या PET, that is where we incorporated expectations when we were looking at the wage setting model. तो उसको formalize करते हैं. We have already only talked about it in elusive terms. So the first question is that what exactly is an expectation? So what is an expectation? Expectations से अभी तक हमने क्या मीन किया है? Expectation is simply, a guess about the future, right? हम expectations, I mean, we are not talking about expectations in terms of that what do I expect out of this, और हम बोलते हैं ना कि दोस्तों से expectation, partner से expectation, उन expectations की बात हम नहीं कर रहे हैं. In the case we say that, expectations क्या है? Expectations दुख का कारण है ना? Because we say that don't expect. But this is not what we are dealing with right now. We are talking about expectations in terms of economics, in which decisions are made based on expectations, right? So in that case, an expectation is about is a guess about the future or about something that is unknown, right? So future is inherently unknown, but expectation can be any guess about the unknown. So unknown can be something that is in the present itself, but you make we form an expectation about it. जो कि हमने game theory में भी इस term को use किया था, right? The belief part that we talked about. Right? So we said that you work upon, suppose you're talking about or thinking कि इस strategy में कैसे respond करें. You work on a belief, right? So that belief is about what your opponent wants, what your सामने वाले का pay off function क्या है, सामने वाले का pay off function अगर पता है, तो the belief is that the person in front of you is rational, right? So these are sort of the same things, right? So belief or expectations are about making guesses, जो चीज हमारे पास unknown है, ठीक, that is an expectation. So what is the ideal situation, right? So expectations are basically a guess about the future, right? And ideally, what would we want? Ideally, we will want that the expectation is right. है ना? सबसे best expectation क्या है? That we make a perfect guess. So an ideal expectation is a perfect guess. And why do we care about the ideal? Because that is what we will strive towards. है ना? ऐसा aimless boat के तरह तो नहीं जा सकते. So then we have to strive toward making or designing a rule for expectation formation that gives us, in the best case, the truth, the perfect guess, right, which is actually correct, and in not the perfect case, something that is very close to reality, जो कि हमारे expectations ऐसे ना form हो रहे हो कि हमारा जो reality है वो कभी match ही ना हो. So this is ideal, but at the minimum, we are making an educated guess and we are not making an educated wish. ऐसे तो wish तो हम कुछ भी कर सकते हैं, but educated wish is actually, ऐसा मतलब it's a sarcastic term. You can wish, it doesn't have to be educated, right? But you here are trying to make an educated guess, and it cannot be delusional. So you have to, which means that you cannot be, or you cannot shut yourself down to information that is available. ठीक. So जो ये evolution हुआ है of different theories of expectation formation, this is basically an evolution about कि लोग information incorporate करते हैं क्या और कितना करते हैं और कितना कर सकते हैं. ठीक है. So we'll start with the very basic, in which people are just working with some set notion of expectations, and then we will move towards when theorists realized कि नहीं ऐसा नहीं है, लोग information भी take into account, and then new theories came up. ठीक है. So at the minimum, we want it to be an educated guess and not an educated wish. All right. So now let us understand कि expectations की बात explicitly होने कब लग गई थी. In economics, this was exactly around the Phillips curve वाला time, है ना? So this is something that we have already discussed, जहाँ पे basically Phillips discovered this relationship, but Phillips did not talk about expectations per se. उनको ये relationship दिखाई दिया, तो उन्होंने वो plot कर दिया, and this trade-off existed for some time. But he did not take into account कि expectation formation किस तरीके से हो रही है, क्योंकि अगर वो उसको if he had taken that into account, then he would have realized कि equation में problem क्या है. ठीक. Later on, people realized कि नहीं, ये expectation मतलब इसको ही this particular like form of relationship is nothing but the aggregate supply curve, and the particular form of Phillips curve, original Phillips curve, comes because you assume a particular expectation, right? By ET का एक particular expectation value assume कर लेते हो, which you assume it to be 0. So then actual में expectations के बारे में बातें होने लग गई, in which जो ये monetarists and these guys came in, which then came up with the expectations augmented Phillips curve. ठीक है. So ये expectations augmented Phillips curve is nothing but using adaptive expectations, which is the second theory that we did. And then जो ये Lucas critique फिर आया ना, तो Lucas critique was then talking about कि adaptive भी enough नहीं है, and then rational expectations came up. Okay. So then the context was of course Phillips curve, but उसका evolution जो है उससे पहले से ही of course expectations की बातें होती थी, starting with Keynes. So Keynes model of liquidity preference can also be reformulated as an expectations theory within an expectation theory framework, जो हम आज करेंगे, right? So Phillips curve जो original था, so that was basically working with pi et equal to 0, and this was not evolving. So you can say कि ये भी एक बहुत ही rudimentary expectation formation था, right? And then the expectations augmented. PC, this was working with the adaptive expectations. And then lupus critique was basically the rational expectations. Right, so we'll do all this in detail again. So even before this, Keynes was working with an expectations model. So we will start there. The first model that we will do is the regressive expectations model. All right. So Keynes का जो liquidity preference theory था, that is basically the kind of expectations incorporated in that model are regressive. Let's see how. So एक बारी model को थोड़ा briefly revisit कर लेते हैं, right? So what was the liquidity preference theory, है ना? So according to Keynes, basically जो liquidity preference है ना? This was of two kinds, right? कौन से लिए liquidity preference था for of people? Which two purposes? याद है? Transactions. और दूसरा transactions demand for money and कुछ याद आ रहा है? कुछ याद नहीं है. Speculative demand, है ना? Transaction demand क्या था? It was the one that basically depended on income. Speculative, right? So transactions were the one which was dependent on income. Speculative was the one which was dependent on interest rate. ठीक है? So ये speculative वाला कैसे काम करता था? Speculative वाला was the place where expectations came into play. Because people had क्या था इसका what was the model? हर इंसान का अपना एक normal rate of interest है ना? Every individual has her or his own notion of a rate of interest that is normal. और वो normal interest rate क्या है? That is the interest rate at to which, right? That is the interest rate to which the interest rate would move ultimately, right? So suppose ye tha speculative was basically talking about the normal rate of interest, right? So we said that this was some IN, and ये क्या था? हर इंसान को लगता था कि अगर आज interest rate इसके ऊपर है, then the interest rate will fall towards the normal. अगर आज interest rate इसके नीचे है, then interest rate will rise towards it. And so this was the idea. Just one second. Yeah, I hope I can continue the entire class. Data का भी issue है. Okay, okay. So then the idea was that if the interest rate is lower, it will move towards the normal. If up, it will go up. If it is higher, it will go down. ठीक है? ये expectation यहाँ पे क्यों है? क्योंकि हर इंसान को लग रहा है कि interest rate का movement ऐसे होना expected है. ठीक? This is where expectations come in. Now the idea is that why is this regressive? Right? Regressive इसलिए है क्योंकि everyone is fixed with some idea. ये मॉडल काम ही इस वजह से करता है क्योंकि हर किसी को लग रहा है कि वहां तक इंटरेस्ट रेट जाएगा. ओके, सो लेट्स सी. सो दिस इज व्हाट वी हैव. स्पेकुलेटिव डिमांड जो था Yeah. So the array. Okay, my screen has frozen. All right. So this was basically the speculative demand was inversely proportional to the rate of interest. And the idea was that if the rate of interest was supposed too high, right? So suppose it is too high. तो expectation क्या था कि because it is high for suppose any given individual, it is higher than the RN. And so suppose the I is greater than IN. In this case, the expectation is that rate of interest will fall. In which case, the expectation is that the price of whatever assets that you are holding or whatever assets that will be floating, unka price ऊपर जाएगा, which means expectation of a capital gain. तो जब इंटरेस्ट रेट बहुत हाई है तो तुम यू विल कीप अ होल्ड ऑन योर एसेट्स, यू विल कीप अ होल्ड ऑन योर बॉन्ड्स बेसिकली. क्योंकि अभी क्यों बेचना जब पता है योर एक्सपेक्टेशन इज फिक्स्ड. योर एक्सपेक्टेशन इज लाइक कि हाँ मेरे को लगता है कि IN जो है सपोज 5% है और आज की डेट में इंटरेस्ट रेट जो है वो 8% है, राइट. सो आई बिलीव दैट इंटरेस्ट रेट इज गोइंग टू फॉल, सो आई विल जस्ट कीप ऑन होल्डिंग माई बॉन्ड, है ना. एंड देन एक्सपेक्ट कि फ्यूचर में जब इंटरेस्ट रेट गिरेगा बॉन्ड का प्राइस बढ़ेगा, मेरे को कैपिटल गेन होगा, राइट. This is the basic idea and this is why the speculative demand is inversely proportional to interest rate. But इसके बीच में फीचर होता है ये constant expectation. All right. So then over here the idea was that basic criticism इसका क्या आता है ये हमने तब डिस्कस नहीं किया. अब हम ये कह रहे हैं कि ये इंडिविजुअल लेवल पे था, राइट. एट द इंडिविजुअल लेवल यू डिसाइड आई के ऊपर है तो तुम होल्ड करोगे, सो आई लेस देन IN है तो तुम ऑल मनी, राइट, यू विल होल्ड bonds in terms of money. What this means is कि at any given particular time an individual, any given individual is going to hold या तो all bonds या तो all money. कोई कॉम्बिनेशन की बात ही नहीं है. अगर इंटरेस्ट रेट ऊपर है तो ट्रांजैक्शन डिमांड ऑफ मनी तो फिक्स है, ठीक है, वो तो उधर है, राइट. बट इन टर्म्स ऑफ दिस पोर्टफोलियो ऑफ एसेट्स, राइट, अगर इंटरेस्ट रेट बहुत ऊपर है so then all the assets will be held in terms of bonds, and if the interest rate is too low then all the assets will be held in terms of money. This all or nothing was the case at the individual level. लेकिन फिर कीन्स ने इसको डिफेंड किया था. Why this was not something that was observed at the aggregate level is because all individuals have different rate of interest which they consider to be normal. ये बेसिक आइडिया था. इंडिविजुअल लेवल पे दिस मॉडल विल ऑलवेज गिव all or nothing. All right. So at the individual level, liquidity preference theory implies all or nothing, right? Or basically all bonds or all money. Right? At the individual level, for an individual, it is always the case that depending on where your interest rate is compared to your normal, you will either keep on holding it as speculative, all of your assets, or you will put it in bonds. But at the aggregate level, there was continuity. And the reason for this continuity was what? That the RIN is different for different individuals. Continuity because IN differs across individuals. है ना। इसका आर्ग्यूमेंट क्या था, याद करो, हमने एक इंडिविजुअल का ग्राफ कैसे बनाया था। एक इंडिविजुअल के लिए ये जो था आई, राइट, ये स्पेकुलेटिव डिमांड था, एंड व्हाट वी हैड वाज कुछ ऐसा ग्राफ था, है ना। यहां से सडन देयर वाज दिस ओवर हियर, राइट, देयर वाज ए डिसकंटिन्यूटी। लेकिन फिर हमने जब एक एग्रीगेट लेवल पे बनाया था तो हमने कहा था कि जब यहाँ से इंटरेस्ट रेट जो है, सॉरी दिस वाज द स्पेकुलेटिव डिमांड, हाँ, सो यहाँ से सपोज फ्रॉम अ वेरी हाई लेवल एज इंटरेस्ट रेट स्टार्ट्स फॉलिंग, है ना, तो देन व्हाट वाज हैपनिंग वाज एट व्हेन इंटरेस्ट रेट इज वेरी हाई, देन एवरीवन बिलीव्स कि इंटरेस्ट रेट गिरने वाला है एंड एवरीवन होल्ड्स बॉन्ड्स, right? Now, as interest rate suppose at a lower level, for some people it is, suppose यहाँ पे for everyone, suppose at, suppose I1, है ना, this is I1. At I1, I is greater than IN for everyone, implies all bonds. Now, suppose this is some I2. At I2, what happens? I2 पे I is greater than IN for fewer individuals, है ना। कुछ लोगों का IN यहां पर भी हो सकता है, इन दोनों के बीच में, है ना। तो अगर ये I2 है, तो जिन लोगों का IN इस रेंज में है, इनके लिए तो दिस इज टू लो। If for any individual the normal rate of interest lies between I1 and I2, right, then I2 is below the normal rate of interest, which means these individuals are now expecting interest rate to go up, right, and then these individuals will hold money, whereas जिनका भी normal rate of interest इस range में है, they will hold bonds, right? ये point clear है ना। Basically the continuity was coming that from the point that हर इंसान का अलग अलग होगा, और किसी भी एक interest rate पे there will be people whose normal rate of interest is above that, and there will be people whose normal rate of interest is below that. And therefore, at the aggregate, we will see that there is a mixed portfolio. Some people are holding money, some people are holding bonds. Individual level पे जो all bonds या all money वाला dichotomy है, वो aggregate पे नहीं होगा. Right? This was the basic idea. So for some individuals, and I is, sorry, less than IN. I is greater than IN for fewer individuals, and I is less than IN for a small group. Which means that more bonds, or rather, which means that not all bonds, mostly bonds, but some money. क्या हो रहा है यहाँ पे, हमको एग्रीगेट में दिखता है that in the aggregate at any given point of time we observe that some people hold bonds, some people hold money. ऐसा तो नहीं है कि ऐसा टाइम आए इकोनॉमी में कि सारे के सारे इन्वेस्ट करना ही बंद कर दें, कोई बॉन्ड्स खरीदना ही बंद कर देते हैं, और एक टाइम आता है जब लोग पैसे रखना ही नहीं चाहते हैं, बिल्कुल ही अपना ट्रांजैक्शंस डिमांड से ऊपर, ऐसा नहीं है. So we are trying to, so Keynes was also trying to explain this observation, which is truth in the real world. तो उनके मॉडल के हिसाब से yes, at the individual level you will see this all bonds or all money, but at the aggregate, because of this difference in normal rate of interest across individuals, there will be a continuity, right? ये कीन्स का मॉडल था. अब यहाँ पे एक्सपेक्टेशंस की दिक्कत कैसे आती है वो समझते हैं. ये वाला पार्ट बिल्कुल क्लियर है, हम पहले भी डिस्कस कर चुके हैं, बट जस्ट फॉर रिविजन, राइट, दिस कंटिन्यूटी, सो दिस इंप्लाइज दैट continuity at the aggregate. Now, there were two criticisms of the model. The first criticism, of course, is that even at the individual level, ये all or nothing चीज होती नहीं है ना? An individual also has some money held as speculative, और कुछ पैसे वो लगा देते हैं. Like people also keep on investing in bonds while they also hold on to some money more than what is their transactions demand, because they think कि अच्छा और जो है इंटरेस्ट रेट ऊपर नीचे जाएगा, और नीचे जाएगा तो हम और पैसे लगाएंगे, राइट? सॉरी, और ऊपर जाएगा तो और पैसे लगाएंगे इन बॉन्ड्स. सो इवन एट द इंडिविजुअल लेवल, द empirical regularity is not something that this model is able to explain, right? That is one issue. The second issue is that now अगर हम regressive expectation के framework में ही देखें, तो तुम ये कह रहे हो कि every individual has different IN, but the point is that IN will also keep evolving, right? You are saying कि एक ट्रूथ है, एक इटर्नल ट्रूथ है, हर किसी को ऐसा लग रहा है कि मेरा जो है वो IN है, right? That will come. That is what this is saying, right? But if it is repeatedly not coming, तो IN भी तो इवॉल्व करेगा ना. Now, if the market is in equilibrium for a long time, suppose 4-5 साल तक जो है इंटरेस्ट रेट, मान लो कि ग्रेट डिप्रेशन का टाइम है, एंड 4-5 साल तक जो है इंटरेस्ट रेट इज स्टक एट लो लेवल, सपोज 2%, 3%. Why will some people keep on expecting के normal rate of interest 5% होगा? So what will happen is, suppose even if the way people hold money is because of transactions motive and because of speculative motive, अगर हम कीन्स का मॉडल को इंटैक्ट भी रखते हैं, तो भी मान लो we are in a system in which it's in equilibrium for some time, right? Suppose it's a stagnant system, and interest rate is around 2% for a very long period of time, for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Then what will happen is that the normal rate of interest of all the individuals will start converging. सब के सब इसी 2-3% के बैंड में आ जाएंगे, है ना? देन इन द एग्रीगेट जो हमको ये पोर्टफोलियो दिखता है लोगों का कि कभी मतलब बॉन्ड्स एज वेल एज मनी आर हेल्ड टुगेदर इन समवन्स इन द एग्रीगेट पोर्टफोलियो, फिर तो नहीं होगा. फिर जो इंडिविजुअल लेवल पे हमको ऑल बॉन्ड्स या ऑल मनी वाला डाइकोटोमी दिखा था, वी विल स्टार्ट ऑब्जर्विंग इट एट द एग्रीगेट लेवल ऑल्सो. वॉलेटाइल पीरियड में is even more difficult to kind of justify this model, because it is so volatile that gives you even less reason to assume that there will be some truth that will be coming, है ना? So it's like saying कि मतलब एक जजमेंट डे होगा, एक मेरा कल्कि आएंगे और एक करण अर्जुन आएंगे, I don't know what. So the idea is that you are not allowing people's expectations to evolve, right? And so you're not allowing मतलब ये नहीं कि लोग नहीं कर रहे हैं, लोग कर रहे हैं, तुम्हारा मॉडल नहीं इस चीज को रिकॉग्नाइज कर रहा, तुम्हारा मॉडल इस चीज के लिए कंपैटिबल नहीं है, right? Yes. So your criticism will be, first criticism will be that even at the individual level, so all money or all bonds, yeah, all or nothing, whatever you want to say it, all or nothing portfolio not observed in reality. Even at the individual level. ये पहली दिक्कत है. दूसरी दिक्कत कि अगर मान लो कि इंडिविजुअल लेवल पे ये होगी, तो भी over time the normal rates of interest of all the people will start converging at the aggregate, and then the all or nothing thing if this model is correct, will also start showing up in the aggregate. है ना? So as IN converges across individuals, this all or nothing portfolio will also show up in the aggregate. है ना? According to the model. Again, not this is not so in the real world. है ना? And this model does not give any mechanism to update expectations. And that's why it's called regressive. तो मैं लग रहा है कि मतलब system will go back to the original, right? So there is no mechanism. So no mechanism to update IN, right? Which would also realistically evolve. So if people do and they do revise their way in which, अगर मान लो कि तुम्हें लग रहा है कि हाँ लोगों को लगता है कि कोई नॉर्मल रेट तक जाएंगी चीजें, बट वो नॉर्मल रेट खुद भी तो चेंज हो सकता है ना, और अगर वो खुद चेंज होता है तब हमको ये मॉडल फिर से एक प्रॉब्लमैटिक कंक्लूजन दे रही है, विच इज दैट इन द एग्रीगेट ऑल्सो ऑल मनी या ऑल पार्ट्स. ठीक, दिस इज योर रिग्रेसिव एक्सपेक्टेशंस मॉडल. Of course, it was recognized कि इसमें दिक्कत है, and then later on Tobin and Baumol, these were two economists which developed newer theories of money demand, जो कि हम money में करेंगे in much more detail. But right now, for the expectation purpose, this is the case. They said that no, this is not how expectations are formed, and they used like better expectation models. But abhi ke liye, this is what we have, right? So this was the regressive expectations model. People were mostly, and it's not that it's entirely incorrect, it's just that during that time period it applied well, and as later on things changed, its applicability reduced. So the model was not able to adapt, which means that the model was inadequate. ठीक, चलो. So now let's discuss the second model. अगर ये model मैंने अभी खत्म कर दिया, so we will stop today because this setup is very, very uncomfortable to me and my back is already aching. So let's start the next one, which is the adaptive expectations model. Okay, so this certainly is an improvement over what regressive was doing. ठीक है, अभी देखो इसका मेन आइडिया क्या है. मेन आइडिया ये है कि इंडिविजुअल्स लर्न फ्रॉम द पास्ट. Individuals learn from the past and your expectation is based on basically two things, है ना. पहली बात तो actual observation और दूसरी कि तुमने expect क्या किया था. So one way to think about it is that, you know, अगर तुमने कुछ actually observe किया, so why will you keep on relying on past expectation, right? The idea is that इसको एक example से समझते हैं, है ना. मान लो कि you suppose you expected कि तुम्हारे जो है marks exam में, right, some marks that you expected out of 100, you expected that you will get a 90, right? This was your expectation. Now, in reality, suppose you got a 98. मानो कि ऐसा हो जाए कि in reality you got 98 while your expectation was 90. Now, for the next cycle, जब तुम्हें अगले एग्जाम के लिए expectation बनाना हो, will you straight away go to 98? Will you start expecting कि अब में तुम्हारे 98 आ जाएंगे? Will you do that? No, right? क्योंकि तुमने वो 90 भी कुछ सोच के ही रखा था. और वो क्या चीजें थी जो तुमने सोच के रखी थी? तो 90 was based on information about that expectation formation was based about all the past information about your own performance. Which means that it was a representation of all past information. And if you observed a 98, ये 98 could be due to a lot of factors. तुम्हारे एक्सपेक्टेशन के हिसाब से तो 90 होने चाहिए थे, बट हो सकता है कुछ चीजें अनएक्सपेक्टेडली सही हो गई, कभी तुम्हारे टीचर का मूड अनएक्सपेक्टेडली सही हो गया, क्वेश्चन वाज सच दैट, या कोई तुक्का लग गया, या कुछ हो गया. The next time you will form expectation, you will not straight away you will not, give entire weightage to the reality that you observed, because the expectation that you had was not a shot in the blank. वो खुद information पे based था. So the next time your expectation would be, somewhere in between. तुम्हें हाँ 90 से ऊपर आ सकते हैं. हाँ, तुम्हें अभी ये लग रहा है कि हाँ, maybe I can do better. Maybe I was just underestimating myself. So maybe like 94, 95, not 98. 8 GPA in theory subjects. So then you got something greater than that. So I'll tell you the difference between what you're saying over here and what this model says. Okay. हाँ, देखो, ये जो है, अगर तुम्हें मान लो कि ये इन्फॉर्मेशन मिल गया, आई एक्चुअली कम बैक टू दिस पॉइंट व्हेन वी डिस्कस रैशनल. ठीक, जस्ट होल्ड ऑन टू दिस पॉइंट. राइट नाउ व्हाट आई एम सेइंग इज दिस अडैप्टिव एक्सपेक्टेशन मॉडल is only going to take into account, so it's saying that every individual forms expectations based on, so the main idea is, so this is your main idea, that individuals learn from the past, right? And expectations are based on two things. One is your past expectation, because the past expectation is based on a lot of information, जो कि उसके भी पीछे क्या क्या चल रहा था, तुम्हारा खुद का कैसा परफॉर्मेंस है, तुमने कैसे पढ़ाई की, सारी चीजों के बारे में. एंड द सेकंड इज द एक्चुअल आउटकम. राइट, सो यू हैव टू फॉर्म एन एक्सपेक्टेशन, क्या इस बार कितने मार्क्स आएंगे. तो पिछली बार तुम्हें लगा था कि मैंने एक्सपेक्ट किया था 90, आया था 98, सो प्रॉब्ली 94 अराउंड, राइट, 94, 95. So this is the basic model that we are going to work with, and we will formalize it. ठीक है, and then we will see कि इसके pros and cons क्या हैं. So let's work with inflation. ठीक है, अच्छा, इसमें ये भी है that if suppose you expected 90 and you got 90, then what will you do? You will keep your expectations at 90. मिलेगा कि हाँ बिल्कुल सही गैस किया, तो 90 आएंगे. अभी अगर 90 से ऊपर गया तो तुम थोड़ा ऊपर चढ़ाओगे उसे, पूरा थोड़ा एडजस्ट करोगे. और अगर मान लो कि 80 80 रह गया, right? So then you will not like start expecting कि अब हो गया मेरा तो कल्याण and I'll just get 80 now. No, you'll say okay, maybe this subject is tougher than I thought, and I'll go down to suppose 84, 85, right? So this is the basic idea. Adjusting or correcting for your past mistakes, allowing for correction. सो जैसे वो नॉर्मल रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट है अकॉर्डिंग टू लिक्विडिटी प्रेफरेंस, तुम्हें दिख रहा है कि नॉर्मल की तरफ नहीं जा रहा है, फिर भी तुम बेवकूफो जैसे एक्सपेक्ट किए जा रहे हो, दैट इज रिग्रेसिव. बट अगर तुम्हें दिख रहा है कि नॉर्मल की तरफ नहीं जा रहा है, यू एक्सपेक्टेड नॉर्मल बट यू गॉट लोअर, you lower your expectations, right? And that is how the normal will also start adjusting. And if we look at Keynesian theory, तो ये जब normal सबका adjust हो जाएगा तो सबका normal same हो जाएगा. And if everyone's normal is same, then again at the aggregate also we are left with all bonds या all money. Okay? All right. So we will work with inflation. So this is the model. Right? And these are the terminology. तो ये रहेगा हमारा pi t, है ना? ये सब तो पता ही है हमें. Pi t, pi te expected and the actual value in the past. ठीक है, sorry. This is the expected value for this year. है? ये तो लिख दिया था मैंने. हाँ. So this is the actual value for this year. This is the expected value for this year, and this is the actual value for last year. ठीक है? इसमें हमें actually इसकी जरूरत नहीं है. We need this. We need pi et जिस साल का expectation हमें बनाना है, and we need an expected value that we had for previous year. So this is your this year's expected marks. This is your 90 which you expected last year, and this is your 98 जो तुम्हारे actual आए थे. And this year expectation suppose is your 90, I don't know, 94. All right, so the model में क्या होगा that according to this adaptive expectation hypothesis, what we will have is that this is how the model is written, that the updation in your expectation, which is pi te minus pi e t minus 1, जिस तरीके से तुम अपना adjust expectations adjust करोगे, मतलब 90 से 94 तक का सफर, यहाँ पे कितना एडजस्टमेंट आएगा, व्हाट इज योर अपडेशन, दिस विल बी राइट. ये जो 4 नंबर का अपडेशन आया, ये क्या है, दिस इज सम फ्रैक्शन ऑफ द डिफरेंस दैट यू ऑब्जर्व हियर. यू ऑब्जर्व द डिफरेंस ऑफ 8 मार्क्स, यू अपडेटेड इट बाय 4 मार्क्स, मतलब वो फ्रैक्शन इस केस में क्या था, हाफ. ठीक. सो यू ऑब्जर्व a mismatch of your reality and expectation, and then you update your expectation, but not all the way, not necessarily, you can, not all the way, but you allow for it, right? So then you update it by some amount. So pi et minus pi et minus 1, the change in expectations is some lambda times pi t, right, minus 1 minus pi et minus 1. Which is this and this. तो मुंह मत खुलवाओ यार मेरा. You have recognized that she will say something. I won't say anything. ठीक है. So your alpha is allowed to be between 0 and 1, including 0 and 1, or that is also allowed. So then this is what we will call, ये है, this is basically your change in or change or updation in expectations. Right? And this is what? This is the error in previous period. Okay, अब इसका हम ब्रैकेट खोलेंगे and we will write it. Basically हमारा aim यहाँ पर क्या है, that we have an unknown variable which is pi et. है ना, मतलब जो इस साल का एक्सपेक्टेशन होने वाला है, और वी विल लिंक इट टू variables that we have already observed in the past. So this is called iterative replacement. ठीक है, so हम वो iteration करते जाएंगे and we will see that how that can be written. So what we can do is first of all इसका bracket खोलते हैं and we can write it like this. You move it to this side. What do you get? You get lambda times pi t minus 1 minus lambda times pi et minus 1 plus pi et minus 1. लिख सकते हैं ऐसे. So what you get is lambda times pi t minus 1 plus 1 minus lambda times pi et minus 1. Which is another way of saying the same thing. This is saying what? कि ये जो pi t है ना, मतलब pi et है next साल का expectation, you give some weightage to what you actually expected, right? So you give some weightage to the 90 marks that you expected, and you give some weightage to the actual 98 marks that you got. Depending on कि क्या पैरामीटर है, लैम्डा का वैल्यू क्या है, योर वेट कैन डिफर, है ना. हो सकता है इस पे ज्यादा वेट हो सकता है इस पे ज्यादा वेट हो सकता है. तुम्हें क्लियरली अपने ऊपर भरोसा हो कि 90 से ऊपर आने वाली तुम्हारी औकात है नहीं, सो देन यू विल गिव मच मोर वेटेज टू दिस. बट अगर तुम्हें भरोसा है कि नहीं, मतलब यू अंडर एस्टिमेटेड योर सेल्फ, देन यू विल गिव मोर वेटेज हियर. That can vary, but the idea is that your expectation for next year is a weighted sum of the expectation that you had and the reality that you faced. ठीक है, so now this is for period T. If this holds in period T, तो period T minus 1 में भी same चीज hold की होगी, है ना. Same must hold in the model. पीरियड वाइज मॉडल बदलना तो नहीं चाहिए, तो पिछले पीरियड में भी हो सकता है. So then what is that in the previous period your pi e t minus 1 would be what? Again, lambda weightage you will give. This is how you keep on updating your expectations in every period. So lambda weightage you give to the previous year's actual value, and 1 minus plus कहाँ से आ गया? Yeah. 1 minus lambda weightage you give what you actually expected in that period. ये इस साल हुआ तो पिछले साल भी तुमने ऐसी एक्सपेक्टेशन फॉर्म किया होगा. Then similarly you can also have for t minus 2, जो कि तुमने उसके पिछले साल देखकर बनाया होगा. t minus 3, sorry, right, and so on. Every time you update your expectations according to this, you look at the actual value and you look at what you expected. Every time you keep on updating. Cool. So what you can do is we can now substitute. Suppose, look over here. In this, हम ये pi t minus 1, sorry, pi et minus 1, ये वाला, this one, ये का वैल्यू हम यहाँ से सब्स्टिट्यूट कर सकते हैं, right? What we will do is we will substitute pi et minus 1 from here to here. All right, and then जब इसमें हमारे पास pi et minus 2 आएगा, तो हम लोग ये वाला उठा के यहाँ डालते हैं. All right, आइटरेशन से हम रिप्लेसमेंट करते जाएंगे, आइटरेटिव substitution. All right, so then what do we get? We get that your pi et, जो कि इस साल का एक्सपेक्टेशन है, that is equal to lambda times pi t minus 1 plus 1 minus lambda times what? 1 minus lambda times pi et minus 1. 1 minus lambda times pi et minus 1 plus 1 minus lambda times what? 1 minus lambda times pi et minus 1. 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 1 minus lambda times pi et minus 1 का वैल्यू ये है, you will put this value, right, which is what, which is lambda times pi t minus 2 plus 1 minus lambda times pi et minus 2. Which we can replace again. So we can say that lambda pi t minus 1 plus lambda 1 minus lambda, right? Pi t minus 2 plus 1 minus lambda square, है ना? Pi et का अब हमको वैल्यू रिप्लेस करना है यहाँ से, pi et minus 2, जो कि है right, and so on, है ना? We can go till the beginning of time since you got up and started making expectations, है ना? मान लो कि जब तुमने college join किया, not when you were born, right? So then you can go back to the first pi t minus, suppose t minus t, which is t0, right? जो हमारा शुरू का first time period था, ठीक? So then what we can see is that अब हम इसको जब सारा खोल के लिखेंगे, what do we get? We get that pi et is equal to lambda pi t minus 1, ठीक है, plus lambda 1 minus lambda pi t minus 2, है ना, plus lambda times 1 minus lambda square, ये देखो यहाँ पे pi t minus 3 plus lambda 1 minus lambda cube pi t minus 4. एक जेनेरिक टर्म क्या होगा, lambda 1 minus lambda to the power k and pi t, sorry, k minus 1 and pi t minus k. राइट तो इसका मतलब क्या है कि हमने एक अनऑब्जर्वेबल चीज को उठाया, दिस इज समथिंग दैट इज अनऑब्जर्वेबल या फिर जिसके बारे में हमें गेस करना है, एंड वी हैव एक्चुअली written it as a function of actually already observed values, ठीक है, so these are all observed. ओके नाउ अब इसका मतलब क्या ये है कि भाई तुम्हें एक साल में एक्सपेक्टेशन फॉर्म करने के लिए यू हैव टू know the values of all the way till the beginning of time, right? No, the idea is that यहाँ पे जो lambda है ना, lambda is less than 1, ठीक? So lambda is less than 1, so of course 1 minus lambda is also less than 1. So ये जो increasing ये powers हैं, है ना, यहाँ से ये हो गया, ठीक है, ये हो गया, all these powers, of course the numbers get smaller and smaller, so the weightage that you give to the past values become smaller and smaller. So इस मॉडल में the heaviest or the most weightage is given to values that are the most recent, and as you go back in the past the weightage given to those observations. अब तुम्हें सपोज तुमने स्कूल में ऑब्जर्व किया कि मेरे तो मैथ्स में 99 आते थे, है ना, जीपी, हाँ जीपी इसमें तो वही है ना, सो यू ऑब्जर्व दैट स्कूल में तो मेरे 99 आते थे, बट स्कूल में आते थे और बाय द टाइम यू आर इन द फाइनल ईयर ऑफ योर कॉलेज योर मैथ स्कोर्स कम डाउन टू से 65. सो ऑफ कोर्स यू बिलीव कि हाँ स्कूल वाले मैथ्स तक मेरा ठीक था, सो यू विल नॉट रिड्यूस योर एक्सपेक्टेशन से टू 40 और 30, बट यू विल नॉट कीप ऑन एक्सपेक्टिंग वो जो नॉर्मल इंटरेस्ट रेट जैसा तुम यही एक्सपेक्ट नहीं करते रह जाओगे कि तुम 99 तक ही रहोगे. The weightage given to that past value or all those past values will become lower and lower. And this model makes sure that happens is because lambda is actually a number between 0 and 1. See? So even if lambda is equal to 0, तो तब तो तुम कुछ अपडेट ही नहीं कर रहे हो, है ना. So in fact यहाँ पर when you put lambda you should alpha क्यों लिखा है मैंने यहाँ पे, this is greater than 0 and less than equal to 1 because 1 is also allowed, लेकिन 0 से greater, क्योंकि अगर 0 से greater नहीं है then there is no updation. All right, so then you are able to relate an unobservable value and base it on past information that you have. Consumption multiplier नहीं है ना, ये तो reduce हो रहा है over time. अच्छा, that is you're saying. Yes. All right, so the addition that happens every time, or the addition that happens in the past gets reduced. So you give more weightage to values that are in more recent time periods. So your lambda is less than 1, which lambda is less than equal to 1, right? Which basically means that coefficient or weights of values further in the past gets reduced. Right? So 4 or 5 years of data would suffice. So if I now start making an evaluation and start basing it कि भाई मेरे स्कूल में क्या होता था, ठीक है, or even if I do it, the lambda, like the weight would be so small that it would, not add much input. All right. So now let us look at what are the advantages of this model. है ना, ये मॉडल काफी सही लगता है. इसी तरीके से usually form expectations. So there are a lot of advantages of this model. Right? The first advantage is that people will eventually catch on. So as you can see, this is a direct, remedy to the problem with that was there with regressive expectations कि लोगों को समझ ही नहीं आ रहा था, लोग अपडेट ही नहीं कर रहे थे अपने expectations. But here you will see that अगर आज you observe that in the next period you actually got suppose 96, right, या फिर 97, तो तुम फिर 94 से अपडेट करोगे ना 97 की तरफ, है ना, and over time you will get closer and closer to your actual score. ठीक, so then the errors keep on reducing because the error in the expectation and actual value, a part of it you are using it to update your current expectation. So people will eventually catch on to the reality, and how fast they will catch on will depend के lambda का value क्या है, वो ठीक है. How fast they can catch on will depend on के whether lambda is large or small, that's fine, but they will catch on. ठीक है. And second advantage is that is of course applies to any model, any variable. अभी हमने भी talked about marks, you can talk about any variable for that matter. Inflation हो गया, unemployment हो गया. Usually forecasting के लिए this is very useful. ठीक है. So any variable that you want to forecast, this is usually the go-to model. Of course not this simplistic, और इसमें वो करते हैं, but फिर भी. All right. And the thing is that it links unobservable to observable, which makes it very tractable. Right? And we know that जो expectations augmented Phillips curve था, वो इसी model पे था, in which your lambda was basically equal to 1. है ना? So look at this. When your lambda is equal to 1, your pi et becomes कहाँ गया मेरा, what was the form in which we wrote it? Yeah, this one, है ना? So when your lambda is equal to 1, so your expectation pi et becomes exactly equal to whatever inflation was there in the last time period. This simply becomes 0. So you look at the reality. ये वाला तब होगा जब तुमने ऑब्जर्व किया 98 और तुमने अपना एक्सपेक्टेशन 98 मूव कर दिया, right? So you did not give any weightage to the 90 that you were expecting. All right. Okay. Now, what are the drawbacks? There are a lot of drawbacks of this model. The criticisms are important, which will also lay the foundation for, and in this context, I will talk about what Rajni's point was. Okay. So this model says कि तुम past information use करोगे, which is good, which is very good. And this is something that was basically addressing regressive वालों का problem, कि वो past information use ही नहीं कर रहे थे. लेकिन the way this now is restricted is कि तुम current information भी use नहीं कर रहे हो, तुम और कोई information ही नहीं use कर रहे हो, right? So if suppose Rajni said के मान लो कि उसका expectation था 9, right? And then the actual value was suppose 7, क्योंकि 8 से ऊपर किसी को मिलते नहीं है, ठीक? Actual value was 7. अब तुम्हें लग रहा है कि I'm still audible, right? Yeah. Now you feel that 7 और 9 के बीच में चलो चलो maybe 8.5. Now why 8.5? You have been explicitly told कि 8 से ऊपर नहीं मिलते हैं, तो क्यों लेना है 8 से ऊपर? Why would you expect that? Okay, if I have explicitly told you that in the UPSC the maximum marks given is 60% in any answer, why would you keep on expecting that I'll write such perfect answer that I'll get an 8 on 10? You will never get it. Right? If suppose in 1991 it was told that now liberalization will happen and the exchange rates are going to free float to a large extent, and a fixed exchange rate nahi rahega regime, so the traders and the business people, they will be foolish to kind of expect that the India's or the rupee will be overvalued like it was. It won't be. So then the problem with this model is that, of course, you use basic past information you should use, but that restricts it to using only past information and not taking into account directly telling, मतलब policy में लोग तुम्हें directly बता रहे हैं कि ये होने वाला है, why not take that into account? Okay, that is one big restriction of this model. और यही चीज जो लूकस क्रिटिक के टाइम में हमने बात की थी, यही कहा था. So they were saying, people will keep on forming expectations in the way कि भाई whatever was the last. I'm telling you that the central bank is going to reduce the inflation rate. Rates are going to get high. So why not do that? ठीक? So the first point of criticism is that it restricts people to use only past information. Right? But people ideally would use whatever information is available. Second is the systematically wrong prediction part. And this is the case again, जो लूकस ने बात की थी कि अगर लोगों को दिख रहा है that every year inflation is going up, है ना, हमने लैम्डा का मैक्सिमम वैल्यू क्या अलाउ किया 1. If last year inflation was suppose CBSE में हो तुम, ठीक है, और CBSE में तुमने ऑब्जर्व किया है कि भाई suppose in say 1990s इंग्लिश में मार्क्स आते थे मैक्सिमम 80, ठीक है, और उसके बाद से यू आर ऑब्जर्विंग दैट टीचर्स आर नाउ बीइंग लिबरल, फिर 80 से 85 हो गया, 90 हो गया, तो देन व्हाई कीप ऑन एक्सपेक्टिंग कि अगले साल 90 ही होगा? व्हाई नॉट एक्सपेक्ट कि अगले साल 95 भी हो सकता है? ओके, इफ यू आर सीइंग कि इन्फ्लेशन हर साल ऊपर ही जा रहा है, why keep on expecting कि इस साल पिछले साल की तरह 10% होगा? Why not expect that it will be, it may go to 11, it may go to 12, right? So this is the problem with adaptive, कि ये again this is an information that is embodied in the past trend. Past में इस variable का एक secular trend है. This variable is going up in a secular way. What this model incorporates is only the value and not the trend. So it will be systematically wrong. तुम चाहे लैम्डा 1 कर दो, बट तुम्हारा जब इन्फ्लेशन 10% है, तुम अगले साल 10% एक्सपेक्ट करोगे, whereas inflation will go to 12, and then you will expect 12 and the inflation will go to 14, and then you will expect 14, it will go to 16. Systematically wrong. You will catch on, but अगर ऐसा underlying trend रहेगा तो इसमें कभी catch on नहीं करोगे. वो तब कैच ऑन करोगे जब थोड़ा बहुत इधर उधर मूवमेंट होता रहेगा. ऑलराइट, सो सिस्टमैटिकली रॉन्ग प्रेडिक्शंस इफ the underlying variable has a secular trend. So it did address that part that you will update, but you're not again using all the information even in the past that exists. तुमने सारा ये भी information use नहीं किया कि पिछली बार variable continuously ऊपर ही जा रहा है, right? The third is, these are more technical sort of things, but again problematic, is that averages may never occur. सपोज कोई वेरिएबल है जिसके दो ही पॉसिबल वैल्यूज हैं, 0 एंड 10. यू ऑब्जर्व 0 और तुमने सोचा कि अगले साल जो है वो 0 होगा, ठीक है, क्योंकि तुम पास्ट इंफॉर्मेशन पे बेस कर रहे हो, एंड यू सपोज लाइक you give all the weightage to reality and no weightage to expectation, which means that lambda is equal to 1, है ना? तो तुम्हें लगा कि पास्ट इंफॉर्मेशन तो 0 था, इस बार 0 होगा. फिर तुम्हें लगा कि अच्छा 10 था, 10 होगा. बट अब क्या होगा कि इन ऑन एवरेज सिंस 0 एंड सॉरी नॉट लैम्डा इक्वल टू, let's do this example, right? So suppose only two possible values of a variable, उसमें तो तुम सिस्टमैटिकली गलत ही होते जाओगे. बट दिस इज अनदर एग्जाम्पल. So this is 0 and 1. Now if your lambda is equal to 0.5, right? So your expectation in any given year will be what? 0.5 times 0 and 0.5 times 10, which is 5. तुम्हें एवरेज एक्सपेक्ट करते जा रहे हो, मुझे लग रहा है कि 0 या 10 के बीच में. बट द फैक्ट इज कि 5 तो ये वैल्यू कभी नहीं लेगा ना. दिस वेरिएबल कैन ओनली टेक 0 और 10. सो इफ you have any value that lies between, so if lambda is equal to 0.5 or any value, right? So lambda belongs to 0, 1. You will always be wrong. You will always be wrong. If it is any value between, suppose अगर ये closed bracket है, ठीक है? It is any value between 0 and 1. It will be a value between 0 and 10. अगर 0.5 है तो वो 5 होगा, अगर 0.6 है तो 6 होगा. बट ना कभी 5 आएगा, ना कभी 6 आएगा, ना कभी 9.9 आएगा. It will always be 10 and you will always be wrong. Secondly, even if you keep your value equal to 1, तब तो और ही दिक्कत है. तुमने 0 देखा, तुम्हें लगा 0 आएगा, 0 नहीं आया. अगली बार 10 आ गया, फिर तुमने देखा 10 आ गया, फिर 0 चला गया, right? So if this keeps on happening, again you will never be right and you're not even updating correctly. So you are using past information, but here also you're not using entire past information. Your past information tells you that it can only take two values, not using it completely. Okay? Then the fourth one is like even more, I mean, छोटा point है, but हो सकता है. Suppose के तुम्हें जैसे government has set a expenditure capital expenditure target, और इस साल का ये क्या तो था इनका 11 क्या था इनका शुभ नंबर, 11,000 करोड़, 11,000 crore, something like that, right? Now, usually the capex expenditure, right, for the entire fiscal year, it has to be spread around the fiscal year. It doesn't have to be, but it is, right? So, सब एक ही दिन नहीं खर्चा हो जाता है, अलग-अलग तरीके से होता है. So, अब you can have different expectations, right? So, suppose you expected that by the half year, ठीक, half पैसा खर्चा हो जाएगा, right? So, you expected that by 6 months, half of the money will be spent. But that year was election year. और उसमें शुरू के 6 महीने में खर्चा ही नहीं हुआ. तो अब अगर you observe this, that उस 6 महीने में the expenditure was hardly anything. Why will you not use it to update your expectation for the next 6 months? अगर सरकार को टारगेट पूरा करना है, so next year for the next 6 months the expenditure will be more than 50%. 70%, 80% expenditure second half में आने वाला है. But according to this model, तुम ये update नहीं कर पाओगे, right? So then these kinds of problems exist, even though it's a very strong model. A lot of times it is used in a lot of variables that first of all do not have a secular trend. अगर secular trend होगा तो ये काम नहीं करेगा. अगर ऐसे क्या बोलते हैं binary sort of variable होंगे तो भी ये काम नहीं करेगा. But if the variable is continuous, it doesn't have a secular trend, ऊपर नीचे जाता है, adaptive expectations work pretty well, right? So it's not like we don't throw it away. It's a good starting point. It works very well for a lot of variables. But of course has a lot of drawbacks also in cases where there is either a secular trend or there is a like flip-flop sort of thing, discrete variable है. ऐसा variable है जिसका कि you need to predict the timeline of how the cumulative will take place. So इन सब चीजों में problem करता है because not only is the current information not taken into account, the entirety of past information is also not taken into account. Right? So not all the component of the information is taken into account. All right, so that is your adaptive expectations. This is the expectation with which the Phillips curve, the expectations augmented Phillips curve was built. उसके बाद हम इसके problems rational भी discuss करने के बाद then we will discuss the long run Phillips curve as well. ठीक है, so एक Phillips curve हुआ short term में जहाँ पे हमको ये दिखता है कि इन्फ्लेशन का कुछ एडजस्टमेंट करने पे आउटपुट का या अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट का कुछ एडजस्टमेंट का ट्रेड ऑफ होता है. ठीक, एक्सपेक्टेशंस ऑगमेंटेड फिलिप्स कर्व में भी दो मॉडल्स फेल इन केस ऑफ इंडिया. यहाँ नहीं अप्लाई होता ना. People don't expect, we don't form expectations for these things. We have given up. Okay. Or in fact, you can form expectations, right? So you can form expectations कि अगर कहा गया 1 साल में बनेगा तो कम से कम 5 साल तो लगेंगे, right? And then you also, update it that, over time you see that the quality has been like this. So you do update your expectations, right? So the fact is that the reality always will comprise of people who are forming expectations regressively, people who are forming expectations adaptively, and people who are forming expectations rationally, right? Reality, truth, कभी भी black and white नहीं होता है. कभी भी you will not see that any one model is able to explain the real world full-fledgedly. It cannot. Humans are, by default faulty creatures. तो तुम एक perfect model को ले जाओगे एक imperfect world को explain करने, तुम नहीं कर सकते. ठीक है? The point is that what we observe on aggregate is how averages move. Right? So if many people are doing something, if most people are doing something, average of course goes in that direction. तो जब उस direction में जाते हो तो तब another theory which is better able to capture that aggregate or capture that average is better suited. So ऐसा थोड़ी है कि today there are no people who do not form expectations regressively. Of course there are, right? There are people, but डिपेंडिंग ऑन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट, डिपेंडिंग ऑन द वेरिएबल. हो सकता है कुछ वेरिएबल के लिए तुम्हारे एक्सपेक्टेशंस हमेशा रिग्रेसिव हो, मोस्टली फॉर सपोज रिलीजियस वेरिएबल्स. expectations are usually regressive in all religions. Huh? But economic variables के लिए suppose you are, if suppose you are a small business जिसके पास ज़्यादा information नहीं है, जिसका market बहुत छोटा है, सिर्फ गांव में है, adaptive expectations may be better. But if you are a business which has access to a lot of information, then rational expectations would be better suited for you because you can take into account all the information. बट अगर तुम्हारे पास है नहीं इन्फॉर्मेशन तो तुम कैसे करोगे? तो तुम तो फिर पास्ट डेटा पर ही बेस करोगे ना, राइट? सो एट एनी गिवन टाइम ऑलवेज बी वेरी केयरफुल अबाउट इट कि मॉडल रियल वर्ल्ड को एक्सप्लेन करता है, रियल वर्ल्ड मॉडल में फिट नहीं होता है कभी, ऑलराइट? वी डोंट डिसाइड बजट, यू रियलाइज? जो लोग करप्शन में रहते हैं बजट वो ही डिसाइड करते हैं. All right. So the next model is what is called the rational expectations model, which is built on, again, the basic flaw of this model. Okay, सारा information नहीं use किया जाता है. Past वाला information, present वाला information, सारा information use नहीं किया जाता है, and that is not how people would form expectations. And these economists had, these later economists, जो कि Friedman के बाद, Lucas and Sargent, these economists had very high hopes about how people form expectations. They are rational and they have access to all the information that is required to form expectations, right? So that is the next model that we are going to do, rational expectations. उसके लिए हम क्या करेंगे कि we will work through the ASAD model और उसको हम 3 तरीके से स्टडी करेंगे. So the ASAD model in which expectations are form adaptively, then the second which is the perfect foresight, and the third which is rational expectations. ठीक है? So we'll talk about this in the next class. This is not suiting me. मेरे को बहुत पेन हो रहा है अभी. So we'll finish it. So you don't have to worry about the timeline. We are a bit behind now because of this week, but we'll cover it up on Saturdays. Okay? And one more class we will require for PYQ discussion. So उसके लिए हम कोई Sunday का भी schedule कर सकते हैं, नहीं तो we can have an evening session for that as well. We'll fix that. All right. So let's stop here. I hope this is clear till now. And क्या हुआ रजनी? Clear? I thought you were smiling for something. Okay. चलो ठीक है. So I'll see you after the festivals and have a good time. Enjoy your festival and don't get too distracted. वापस आना है. ठीक है ना? चलो. Okay. Okay, girls. I'll stop here. All right, Chinmay. Thank you. And sorry for this week. I will myself not be able to manage this week. But try करते हैं Friday. नहीं तो फिर you will have to go back to recordings. Saturday हम try करेंगे. Okay. चलो चलो. Bye, guys.